Hello and welcome to this BCS Future Elite webinar. As you may know, Future Elite has been designed as a forum for inspirational leaders in the world of IT to share their career stories and offer advice to ambitious fellow professionals along the way. And today we welcome two DevOps visionaries, Emily Harrison, she's a DevOps delivery manager at Coveyor Insurance, and her unicorn, and Ian Watson, a DevOps strategy consultant at BCS. We'll hear from the speakers and then we'll have questions from you. So please submit them to the chat function on your GoToWebinar control panel as the session progresses. So can I please welcome our first speaker, Emily Harrison, a cat amongst the pigeons. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks, John. Just trying to, have you shared the screen? Oh, there we go. We're just going to share the screen. I just wanted to say hello to everybody. Thanks for the invite to talk about myself. It's a bit one of those uncomfortable topics. So what I thought I'd do is just position this unicorn in front of everybody, just to show that there's a bit of a wackiness that occurs within DevOps. Really excited to talk. Thanks for the invite. I don't know if anybody has actually met me before. I can't see everybody, but I'm really excited to share that. One, I'm from Canada. I don't know if you saw if you can see the flags behind me. My background is basically sort of a Celtic background. I'm sure you can tell because of my lovely COVID baseball cap. I'm a supporter of the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm a bit of a sporty type. And I'm a proud Canadian and British citizen. I guess if you follow along from the actual mind map that I'm showing, there is a little thing in there called Yorkshire Lass, and I'll tell you a little bit of a story about that. Recently, I moved up to Yorkshire, actually not recently, it's about 8 or 9 years ago, and I met some really crazy people in Yorkshire, funnily enough, and I met this fabulous bunch of cycling women called the Queensbury Queens, and they said, "You are such a Yorkshire lass. Don't know what it is about you, but you're really familiar." And so they nicknamed me the Yorkshire Lass and a few other choice nicknames. But I think what I'm trying to say is that, you know, you come up, you bring your background, you come up to Yorkshire, you come to a different culture, and it's kind of like cat amongst the pigeons. You're like, do I fit? Can I get these pigeons? Can I catch these pigeons? So I'm trying to tie all that back into the title of the speech, also tying in my background. I grew up in Canada. I grew up in Canada probably in the 70s and 80s, and in my formative years in university, I really started to find my voice. I found that I really loved learning, and that was one of those important things that I'm going to try and weave through this whole talk. Getting that love of learning, going to school, being inspired by learning new things was really important, and that was really ingrained in me in Canada and also in my family background. And it also, you know, it made me sort of become the person that I am, and it helped me find my voice. I also sort of picked up a lot of sports when I was growing up, and that was also where I turned from a relatively shy person to, I don't know, maybe some people that know me would call me outgoing, or even, dare they say, loud. I'm not embarrassed about that. But interestingly enough, those hobbies and my background and my life and love of learning have really sort of inspired me to continuously explore options. And my education actually isn't in technology. And I would dare say most of the people out there, you guys listening, probably didn't have a degree in technology or a background in technology. You might not have had that. I certainly didn't. I have a degree in geography and a teacher's certificate, so go figure on that front. But one of the things that I found was that going back to the love of learning, finding my voice and finding my confidence, I started exploring things that I found cool, like Xbox. Oh, gaming, cool. I started exploring different technologies, bought myself a computer, got into sports, found that I loved things like Garmin watches, and a lot of technology that supported what I was doing and my hobbies. So that sort of shape evolved, and my brain sort of went, okay, this is really important. And you guys are probably wondering, where the hell does DevOps come in? Sorry for swearing. Where does DevOps come in into play here? And actually, it didn't for quite some time. I lived in Canada, I worked in Canada, I actually worked in New York, and I worked for software companies. I worked as a bond broker, and none of this this is all the first sort of 10, 12 years of my career. None of this led to DevOps. None of this was sort of really organized, or that the thinking wasn't there. But then I'm going to jump to the top left-hand corner of my mind map, and I had light bulb moments. I hope that you guys will remember one thing. If one thing from this talk is about light bulb moments and capturing those, and being mindful of your light bulb moments. From my hobbies, I had light bulb moments. So that I reflect back on it and I go, okay, data, Garmin watches, performance, what am I eating? What am I doing? How is my fitness? All of those things are light bulb moments. And I started linking that thinking and growing that thinking as I sort of moved from working in Canada, working in New York, and working for a software company. And then, interestingly enough, when I was trying to find a work-life balance, probably in 2006, I discovered that actually there's a lot more to my career, and I wouldn't say I was floundering, but I found that I was getting bored very easily and started shifting around jobs. And that's okay. At the time, I was sort of thinking, is it okay? And I checked with people and they were, oh, are you sure? And I said, yeah, no, I really need to move around. I need to find my balance. And I kept looking for that balance. But one of the things that was still embedded in my head was my link to technology, my link and love of learning, and finding my voice. And it kind of goes back to part of the beginning of my mind map. Traveling crept in. I did a lot of traveling. I did a lot of traveling with work. I didn't find my work-life balance. And then, that was around 2006, 2007. I did find my work-life balance. And I thought, okay, I'm going to explore more. And that takes me into, there's probably on the left-hand side of my mind map, that sort of concept of digital scholarship. I don't know if, I know I can't look at you guys and you guys put your hands up and say if you've heard of digital scholarship, but actually in my age group, in my age set, I'm a digital immigrant, but I really wish I was a digital native. And I absolutely 1000% subscribe to digital scholarship. And that was sort of 2006, 2007. When I first heard that concept, it inspired me. It inspired me to actually stop what I was doing, find that work-life balance, and actually go back and get qualified as an ICT teacher. Yeah. And to me, that was, yeah, I'm not a teacher now. I'm back in DevOps, or I'm in DevOps, but it really gave me an opportunity to pause and reflect. I learned something about myself. I learned something about the work-life balance. I learned something about my lifelong love of technology. I also learned to find my voice at that point. You guys are probably saying, oh, she's jumping around the mind map. Well, actually, there's an embedded theme in there. There's sort of pinks, purples, and teals and blues. And it's all about being positive and trying to weave different memories and different experiences into to live and to find your voice and to find your love. And I want to take us back to that light bulb moment. One of the first, my comment about light bulb moments, one of my first light bulb moments, aside from the Phoenix Project and the Unicorn Project, which is the reason why I had the unicorn, one of my first light bulb moments was actually when I was working at a company called Bloomberg, and I found data. They had a product. It was all about selling their data, all about selling their real-time data. And I discovered, I know you're going to say Excel, macros, and VB. Oh, that's really boring. But actually, back in the day, back in the 90s, that was pretty impressive. That was big stuff. Obviously, the internet arrived, and then big data arrived, but I didn't have a light bulb moment with that. I had a light bulb moment with Excel macros and VB, and I reflect on that, and I'm mindful of that, and that brings my love of data back into my head even now. And I think, okay, some of the projects that I'm working on in DevOps, or in the company that I work for, Covea, I'm listening and looking and trying to figure out how they are doing and how they are building their things and how they are incorporating DevOps and how they are working together and collaborating and being transparent. So that was one light bulb moment about data that led me to look and reflect on one of the things that I'm doing now. I also have a real passion for the Phoenix Project book. Every time I talk to people and every time I go and do interviews, I read it in 2013, and I'm trust me, I'm not getting any kickbacks on the Phoenix Project, but I absolutely adore and I would highly recommend that book. There were multiple light bulb moments in reading that book, because I could compare it and be mindful and reflect on the experiences of various companies that I worked in. And it also taught me a lot about the 3 ways of working and finding that balance. And if you look at the word, I'm just going to go off on a tangent here. If you look at the word DevOps, look for the balance in that word, even though it's a split between 2 different things. I also had a light bulb moment when I was talking to someone about the Jez Humble book about continuous integration. That was phenomenal. And that light bulb moment, when I reflect on it now, I think, wow, they were built. What we used to do in the year 2000, 2001, we used to manually deploy things on a weekend, out of hours, and it would take days, and people would be eating pizza in a hot room, and devs would be sit with their head down. We used to do all this stuff manually, and having read Jez Humble's book, you could do deployments. You could do deployments in 5 minutes, in 20 minutes. It blew my mind. So there was a light bulb moment. It's about finding the efficiencies and being mindful and reflecting on how I can also apply that to what I'm doing. The other thing that in that sort of those light bulb moments was Netflix, 1,000 deploys per day. Now they're probably at 1 million by now. Who knows? I don't keep the track of how they've evolved, but it was that bullet point that came out when Netflix started doing CI/CD. It blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. It was more than a light bulb moment, and it was, and I reflect on that, and I think, how can I bring that to my work? How can I bring that to my career? All of those light bulb moments happened over a span of about 10 years. And I have to admit, I shifted jobs, I moved around, I got bored. And if anybody on this webinar, if I've worked with you, I apologize. You probably knew that I got bored, but at the end of the day, I'm now in a position with a fantastic, inspirational bunch of leaders at Covea, where we're given the opportunity to we're given the opportunity to have our voice. We're given the opportunity to continue our love of learning, to fail fast, to succeed. We're inspired by some amazing things, some of the stuff that happened over the last few months, and it's about, for me, if I take back to what I'm trying to say and the message that I'm trying to get across to people, either coming into IT or coming into DevOps, it's about finding your voice. It's about finding your balance. It's about taking all your experiences and being mindful and reflecting on them. Fail fast, because guess what? Everybody fails. It's the truth. Everybody fails, but if you dust yourself off, perk yourself up, and get on with it, you will succeed. And I'm always a believer in that. Find your voice, find your balance. The other thing that I found, which was really important, probably in the last 2 jobs that I've worked in, particularly having the company that I've just joined in the last year, is finding your trust, finding your bubble of trust. And for me, that was really important, that people could hear my voice, people were listening. wasn't that I'm shouting, it was that my voice was heard, that I found my trust bubble, and also people respected the fact that you know, I make an effort to be kind and to be empathetic and considerate. And to me, it's like what I've done is I've kind of brought together all of the positives and the negatives of my background in my youth and growing up and that experience, brought my hobbies together, reflected, and I'm continuously reflecting, and all of the experiences I've had abroad, my love of learning, my light bulb moments. And, you know, I feel like now I'm in a position where I can help others and inspire others to succeed and inspire others to discover the amazing things in particular. And I'm not going to explain what DevOps means to me because everybody has their own opinion about DevOps, but it's a fun, really great environment. And it's a great concept of culture. It's a great thing. It's just, I know I'm saying great a lot, but it blows my mind how DevOps and understanding what various different things like continuous integration and all that kind of stuff, how it inspired me to get into what I'm doing right now. So my advice, find your voice, trust, and be kind. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emily. That's robust advice. Thank you very much. Ian, if I can welcome you to join us. I think I might have turned off your camera.
Oh.
Are we there?
Working on
Ian,
it.
Thank you. So can I introduce Ian Watson, my trip to a career in DevOps and what that even means. Thanks, Ian. I'll make you the presenter so we can see your slides.
Cool. Let's see if I can make this work. Show my screen. Okay. Can we see that? I've got no one to talk to. Can you see that, John?
Good.
Okay,
yeah.
thanks. This is really weird talking to this many people without being able to see anyone at all. Okay, so that was a really interesting talk, and I have so many things that I'm about to talk about now that you have already talked about, which is fascinating, I think. Okay, so my trip through a career in DevOps. Fun. Okay, who am I? Okay, I'm Ian Watson, currently a DevOps strategy consultant at BCS, who are the UK's largest private IT consultancy. I'm a big, unsurprisingly, DevOps and Agile advocate, and also a big fan of 80s glam rock. It's not a necessity for DevOps, but it helps. So I've always been a bit of a geek. I enjoyed playing with computers when I was a youngster, which in those days involved a ZX Spectrum and 48 whole K of RAM to play with. So as I went through school and went to look at university, my mum said to me, you know, you should maybe do a degree in computing or something like that. Oh, I said in typical teenage fashion. That sounds boring, Mum. I don't want to work in computers. So I went and did a degree in maths. And here I am today to talk to you about my career in computers. So first learning of the day is Mum usually knows best. Okay, what does a career in DevOps even mean? What is a DevOps? Now, I think, as we've already heard mentioned, DevOps has very much been the movement that has avoided being defined quite deliberately, and that has upsides and downsides. So what is a DevOps? Please never use that phrase. Are we talking platform engineers? Are we talking automation specialists, people who look at how you deploy your software? Are we talking about the fabled full stack developer? Maybe we mean an evangelist like myself who come in and giving talks. Do we mean a cloud specialist? Is DevOps basically using the cloud? Is it someone who actually understands Kubernetes? See, that one's a joke because no one actually understands Kubernetes. Or is it something else entirely? The answer, I guess, to this is yes, and no, and maybe. It's any and all of these things, but mostly it's, and you'll hear this phrase and it's entirely unhelpful, it's a culture. DevOps isn't a role, it's not a set of tools, it's about development and operations working in that tight collaboration, and has expanded to include, I guess, more areas. Security, testing have been explicitly added in. But basically, it's a means to an end. It's a means of being able to deliver value to your customers rapidly, reliably, and repeatably. With that in mind, my career timeline. So, I guess my career timeline is not a particularly unusual one. I started in technology support as a help desk person, again, because I had a bit of understanding of computers and there were no other jobs for mathematicians when I came out of university. That very rapidly moved through a developer who also did operations, leading a team, leading a explicit DevOps team, head of DevOps, and then to where I am today, which is in the consultancy business. So one of the interesting things I think about my career is a lot of this was actually in the same company. I spent a highly unusual 15 years in the same place. And that wasn't because I was institutionalized or couldn't be bothered to move or wasn't interested in moving. It was because at the place I was, during the 15 years, it grew from less than 100 people to over 1,600 people across 3 countries. So there's a massive amount of change, and I was able to, every 3 years or so, move into a new role and learn something new. So you don't have to move for career progression. It's not always, don't always feel you have to jump. Often there are opportunities where you are, and it's easier to sometimes get into those because you know the arena. Okay, let's have a look a bit more specific. Okay, back in the dark ages, before the words DevOps were coined. So one thing to remember about DevOps is it is a mere 10 years old. Okay, so it was only a decade ago that DevOps Days, the first DevOps Days happened. And I can't remember where it is. I should be shot. It's in Belgium somewhere, probably. Before that, there was IT, there was development. So I followed, as I say, what was a fairly reasonably normal career path. I started in tech support. It's a small company I worked with. I think about 5 people, and they produced a little piece of software which they sold into job centers. So while I was providing telephone support and kind of the first line, have you tried switching it off and on again, I started off watching the developer fix some of the issues that I was taking for, literally leaning over the poor guy's shoulder. So after a while, I was actually able to start fixing some of those things myself. Some of the smaller issues, when they needed it, I could do a quick fix and roll it out. Now, and this gradually got into me doing more and more of the development side of things. The sheer number of times I used to use the phrase, "Paul, could you explain this to me?" The poor guy must have gone absolutely bonkers, and I feel for him, and I'm sorry, Paul, wherever you are now. In the end, he actually moved to Turkey. I'm hoping that wasn't just to get away from me. However, that was my first tentative steps into the role of developer. Long story short, show initiative, be interested, and be at the right place at the right time. Again, I had a fairly standard career as a developer. I changed companies every couple of years as I learned more, and as I moved from sunny Nottingham down to Oxfordshire, and then up here to God's own country about 17 years ago to sunny Leeds. As you can see, I've clearly got the Yorkshire accent now. I guess during this time, my main focus was being a better developer. So this was very much around understanding how to do development, writing code, optimizing code. That was what I found interesting and exciting, and that's what driven me. I think that's the case with a lot of developers. That's where the fun is. It's also from a DevOps perspective where I guess the big trap is, because you focus on that and your cleverness about writing code, and you lose sight of why you're writing code, which is generally to solve a problem that delivers value to a customer. So I guess if I'm honest, my promotion from developer to team lead, which was my next step, was something of a surprise. My boss, who was the manager of the department, pulled me into his office on a Friday afternoon and said, I've got some news. He said, I've been made a director. I went, oh, brilliant, mate. I'm really pleased for you. That's great. He said, yeah. He said, so as of Monday, you'll be managing the department. I was like, what? Pardon? So very much dropped in at the deep end. Place at the right time, show the initiative. Now, leading people is a very specific skill set, and it was something that, again, as I said, I was very much dropped into. When I was a developer, I think I'd assumed that the career path you took was developer into management, and that was how you got on. Please don't assume this. It is absolutely untrue, and even more untrue now than I think it ever was. There are absolutely career paths for highly technical people who want to be individual contributors and get more and more technical into principal developers, into architecture, CTOs. You don't have to move into the management side of things. Do that with your eyes open. If you're genuinely interested in managing people, and it is endlessly fascinating doing so and very tiring and has lots of different challenges to development. So if you want to do that, please, brilliant, do so. And the fact that you understand development and what they do is a massive help and helps trust. But yeah, think about it and make a conscious decision on that one. Don't feel you have to. So while I was in that position, I have my light bulb moments. And this finally brings us to the DevOps bit. So the organization I was at the time had a bit of a rejig of the leadership, and the guy who was the IT director changed roles to be the delivery director. And at this point, all the managers of the development teams got pulled into a room and got a presentation that they were going to move some of the operations people into the development side of things to just improve that collaboration and help it work. Again, at this point, I had never heard the term DevOps uttered. And even in that meeting, no one said the words. However, as they went through this, for me, the light bulb went on. And I looked at how we were working and what we were doing. And we were writing code and we were writing documents of how to deploy the code, giving it to someone else to deploy and run, and then not caring about it or not worrying about it anymore. What they were talking about, this whole, we build it, we have the operations guys as part of the team, and we make sure it's all working. It was suddenly, I was such an obvious thing that we should have been doing all along. I was genuinely nearly kicking myself for not having come up with the same conclusion myself. So what I did was I went back to my desk and I wrote an email to the guy who was organizing this and had the session, and it very simply said, I want to be a part of this. Simple as that, one single sentence. And that's how I ended up working in DevOps. So they built a pilot team to try this with, to sort of prove it out before the whole reorganization of the company to accommodate it. I was asked to provide the technical leadership for that. And it kind of spiraled from there, really. Now, the interesting thing I found out some years later was that one of the other development managers had complained about 6 months later that he had never had the chance to get into that DevOps role that I'd ended up in, and he felt that I'd been unfairly prioritized over him. The only difference was that I had sent that email that took me maybe 30 seconds to write and hit send, and he hadn't. So again, speak up. If you're interested in something, just let people know. There might not be a role there. It might not be I have to wait for a dead man's boots to be promoted into a certain area. Just express an interest, talk to people, or email people if that's easier. So yeah, sometimes you be at the right place in the right time. And again, I still don't believe in luck on that. You kind of make your own luck there. You show an interest. And sometimes, yeah, you just need to let people know that you're interested in what's going on. Okay, what is this DevOps thing anyway? So when we first set up the pilot team, all of us in it sat around and went, right, we've heard of this thing called DevOps. Literally none of us had a clue what it was about, not least because it's hard to define. The brilliant, amazing, wonderful thing about DevOps is there is an incredible community around it. Just brilliant, just one of the best. So early days, we probably spent 3 months just immersing ourselves in DevOps, the community, and anything we could get our hands on, going to conferences, reading books. So Leeds DevOps is a fantastic institution, and I'm sure we'll return once we have some normality back in the world, hopefully sooner rather than later. But there are so many ideas we got just from going to that and hearing people like yourselves talking about what they'd done, what had worked, what hadn't. And just it was one series of light bulb moments after another. We took them away, we tried them, and then eventually we were the ones up there coming and talking about what we'd done. And again, that's how the community works. It's very accepting, very transparent and honest. It's great for sharing. There's not a lot of, oh no, this is our business, we're not going to tell you how we're doing things. Everyone there genuinely wants everyone else to succeed, which is brilliant. If you haven't read the Phoenix Project, as you've heard mentioned, and I'm also not on commission, read the Phoenix Project. It's the single best thing for helping to explain what is this DevOps thing anyway. It's quite an easy read and a good story. Continuous Delivery, also referenced already by Jez Humble and Dave Farley, is also an absolutely brilliant book on continuous delivery, continuous integration, branching strategies, that sort of thing. It's a harder read than the Phoenix Project, but really goes deep into the details of how you're successful in that sort of technical software delivery. Accelerate, another one, which I happen to have a copy here, which I was just reading earlier, which I still reference, is another book, again, by some of the same people, Jez Humble, Gene Kimmer at the Phoenix Project, and Nicole Forsgren. And there's another great book this time around how you would implement a lot of the ideas you've got from the previous books into your company. So yeah, immerse yourself, get involved, talk to people, ask questions, all become clear. So eventually I became head of department. And as a head of department for DevOps, the main thing that I could see was there is a lot of routes into a career in DevOps. So looking at the people that made up my teams, there were people who were DBAs, people who were developers, people who were agile coaches, infrastructure engineers, network engineers, people managers. And again, because DevOps isn't a role, it's a collaborative way of working. It's something that pretty much anyone in the technology industry can get involved in, and should, I'd argue. It's a lot of fun, and you get a lot from it. The people who excel, who I could see doing really well in that environment, were the ones, not necessarily the loudest ones, but the people who could empathize with other people. So the people who could understand that what they were doing was simply trying to help the entire flow of value from sort of one end to the other, really. It was those people who could talk to others, understand what their challenges were, and then try and help, who did really well. And again, that's not just the softer skills like the agile coaches, that's absolutely the engineers and the sysadmins as well. Those ones that could put themselves into the headspace of others succeeded and created some absolutely brilliant pieces of engineering. Okay, and finally, where I am now, into consultancy. So relatively recent move, and it's something fundamentally different from anything I've ever done previously. It's uses a lot of all the same ideas that I've previously had, but the difference between being a practitioner and being a consultant, it is massive in terms of the amount I'm learning. I'm right back to the time when I was a developer and trying to learn to develop better with the rate of what new things I'm understanding. And frankly, it's tiring, but it is still an awful lot of fun. So one of the big things I'm seeing as a consultant now, so I'm seeing lots more companies, which is great, is that a lot of companies are not as advanced as I assumed they were. So I think when you go to things like these DevOps and it's the people presenting and this is what's going well, and you kind of get easily assume that all companies are doing these super switch engineering and continuous improvement and all that good stuff, masses of automation and monitoring and observability, and it's just not the case. The lion's share of companies are still absolutely ripe for improving. So joining them as any role and bringing those DevOps sensibilities, behaviors, and ways of thinking, there are so many companies that will benefit from that. And again, going back to the getting yourself into the right place at the right time, that's absolutely what companies will see if there is someone taking initiative, coming up with new ideas of being better. And yeah, share. So I love sharing my experiences, helping others. That's why I'm here today. That's a big reason why I took on the consultancy challenge, is because I get to talk about what works and learn a lot more from other companies than being in the same one. And actually, you know, being paid for sharing my experiences is a nice side benefit as well. So some pieces of advice which may or may not be useful to you. Much like DevOps, one size doesn't fit all. So take these, your mileage may vary, I believe is the phrase. First off, ask why a lot. So I think throughout my career, from when I was in tech support to even where I am now, don't be afraid to ask why. I've sat in boardrooms full of IT directors, CIOs, and I've been sat there going, I don't understand what someone's talking about. And I've gone, yeah, I'm sorry, you're going to have to explain that to me. Apologies if I'm dumb and the only one in the room. But almost without fail, there will be half the room also nodding along that, yeah, they didn't get it either, but they just didn't want to say. So never be afraid to ask why, an awful lot. Don't worry if you don't have a carefully planned out career path. As we've learned from Waterfall against Agile, you can make the best long-term plans and the most detailed you like, and they will very, very quickly, immediately and completely diverge from what you thought they would do. So be agile with your career. Have an idea where you want to go, but follow what's interesting. And if you need to change your plan, then change your plan, obviously. I've said it several times, community is amazing. The DevOps community is a great one. Get involved if you're interested in this. Talk to people, go to conferences online at the moment, and read up on stuff. And again, there's tons and tons of blogs as well. Think like a scientist. It's something I haven't really referred to, but again, throughout my career, I've tried very hard to have strong beliefs that are loosely held. So again, when I was developing, I had a strong belief in how you did things and how we worked and what the right things were, and a very waterfall approach seemed very sensible to me. Light bulb goes on. I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? I have new strong beliefs. And when someone proves those wrong, I will change my mind again and evangelize for different ways of doing things. We've all mentioned it. We really should be on commission. Free the Phoenix Project. And finally, yeah, everywhere can get better. And it might well be you that has the right idea. Never assume that that's how we've always done things has any sense behind it. It may have been something put in place for a reason 10 years ago that fundamentally no longer exists. So yeah, you may well be the person with the right idea, and certainly, especially when you're fresh to companies, going back to asking why a lot and coming up with suggestions about doing it better. Good companies will always listen to you. Bad companies may not, and tell you to shut up and get on with it, in which case, change job. And that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's wonderful. And if Emily, you could come back too, that would be fantastic, because we've got a number of questions.
I swear I didn't steal all your ideas, Emily. I promise. I wasn't typing them as you were doing it.
I was laughing while I was on mute. Well done. That was ace.
Thank you very much. I'm
I think
sure
so.
you're on commission for the Phoenix project.
Have we mentioned that?
You a couple of times. There's a number of things. I'm fascinated by the idea that you can be the head of DevOps, and then when you take the definition that you've given of DevOps, that's also, or alternatively, head of a culture or head of a collaborative way of working.
So
We've got a question from Richard. You often see roles such as DevOps engineer versus the statement around DevOps being a culture, as you described right at the start of your talk, Ian. Do you feel, he asks, that DevOps roles are important, or more perhaps, that the culture between development and operations is the primary focus and roles are a little bit less important?
I think the culture is the primary focus. The people that create that culture are the most important thing. So there are absolutely things that need to be done. A platform needs to be built. Software needs to be written and deployed. Someone needs to monitor it, make sure it's running right. So all those things need to happen. But yeah, it's the culture is the most important thing. So the trouble is, when you see an advert for a DevOps engineer, there's literally no way of really knowing what they're asking for. It's an entirely unhelpful description, and it could be any of those things that I mentioned in mine, really. And the cargo culting of it into tools, whilst expected, doesn't help either. Microsoft, so annoyed. I just Azure DevOps indeed. Yeah, so
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think the DevOps as a culture is absolutely, and the people are the most important element to that. I think we have to use DevOps engineer as a bit of a marketing tool in order to get the magical people that do DevOps. And I've called a lot of the people that I've brought in recently. There's a magic there. People that get it find the magic, and it is a bit of a hook. It is a bit of a misnomer, but you know, it's about culture. It's about the people.
yeah.
So there's a question that touches on that from Duncan. He says soft skills are the glue across teams. So, and here's the big one. Any tips on becoming a better communicator?
Oof.
Yeah.
Emily.
Oh, nice lob over there, Ian. Thanks. That's a tricky one. As I've gotten older, I've been able to communicate better, but it's by trying and failing epically and pissing a few people off. But yeah, going back to what Ian said, always asking why and challenging people, but I think challenging people constructively. What you find is there's that divide between technical skills and soft skills, and soft skills came with age, and the improvement of being able. I was always able to communicate, but it's about delivering it in a constructive, palatable way for people to understand that this is actually something that we can do better, and it's an opportunity rather than someone going off and swearing and saying you're crap or defensive or something like that. That's not the last bit I just said is not a positive way to lead someone. It's constructive, positive language, inclusive language as well. And that's what I learned as I got older, and you know, the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it's a certain amount of that. I think the other thing for me, if you want to learn to communicate well, is learn to listen well.
Oh,
yes.
And it's hard.
100%.
It's really hard. It's not easy.
Yeah, agree with that, 1000%.
There's a really interesting question here from Timothy that perhaps should be talked about a little bit more. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know your view. 4 years ago, he said, I came out of university with a degree in applied computing. However, found that most employers were not interested in kickstarting my career due to my Asperger's syndrome on the autistic spectrum. What would your advice be for people in a similar situation wanting to start their careers in DevOps? Emily, what do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm having to, so honestly, I'm just sort of thinking DevOps is a really challenging environment. I think if I don't understand why someone wouldn't consider someone just because, was it because they had Asperger's? I don't think that even equates. If someone comes in and they're a viable candidate, regardless of whether they've got some kind of Asperger's or any form of autism, it's irrelevant. It's how you can communicate. And I know with Asperger's you have challenges around communication, but I would say making that transparent. And if employers don't understand what that means, then they're not worth them working for.
Ian, your view?
That's important to understand that.
I tend to agree. Again, I think looking back at some of the teams I've had, the ones with the most neurodiversity have been the most successful.
Yep.
So
Great.
It is tricky. I think there is still a lot of businesses, and again, as I said, there's far fewer businesses are forward thinking in how they use technology, how the organization's structured, how they hire people, and all of that. So I'm sure it is difficult, but the companies who aren't interested in talking to you are probably not worth working for.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's hard. And I think people like yourselves, John, actually are in a superbly good position to help with that, and promote, I say, that sort of neurodiversity, that diverse approach to team building.
Yes,
yeah.
Robust advice there. If the company isn't interested,
question, by the way.
don't work for them. Yeah, okay, I'll go with that. Now, for both Ian and Emily, Damien asks, is there a single skill, ability, package you'd rate as the most essential for a DevOps engineer? Ian, what do you make of that?
Say that again, the most?
Is there a single skill or ability or package that you would rate as the most essential for a DevOps engineer?
I would say what I said earlier, which is the ones who are most successful, those who could empathize best.
Getting inside the headspace of others.
Yep. Empathize and listening. You said listening earlier. There are technical skills that you can learn, but it's empathy and listening are something that often people have to learn or inherently have it.
Hatim wonders if you can do a bit of future gazing, which direction is DevOps headed with increased usage of cloud tech and AI? Emily.
You take that one first, Ian.
So I've said a few times, and I think don't get wedded to that word DevOps. It's the latest thing. It will go away. What I would really like is a single word that described agile, DevOps, and lean into one thing, and then we could go, right, that's what we're calling good software engineering, or practices, and how we deliver software in a good way. Cloud, all it means is we can do stuff more quickly, more reliably, more repeatably than we could. It obfuscates us away from the tin. Now, down there somewhere, there's some poor soul racking up servers and plugging Ethernet cables in still. So we've not all got away from that, but it's on a obviously much more massive scale. So I think, and the AI one is interesting, and machine learning. That really helps with the observability side of things. So the understanding how my product's performing, how people are using it. That's more on the product management side, I would say, and how we sort of design and build products, and then how the DevOps stuff will let us pivot quickly if we discover things aren't being used as we expect them to, or stuff like that. I mean, the core principles, the core culture, the thinking, technologies don't change that. Again, that's the behaviors of looking at the whole system, and making sure that you're not passing errors further down the chain, regardless of the technology. I mean, we've done it and implemented these sorts of behaviors on VMware as much as we have on AWS or Azure.
Emily.
I tend to, again, Ian and I are very similar in our opinions. It would be interesting if we weren't. I think I liked what you said about agile, lean, and DevOps becoming a melting pot and finding a word. Because as we spoke about DevOps earlier, DevOps is about the people, it's about the culture, and it is about the magic. And where will that go? That will not change. People will just evolve and improve, and then that cultural ethos and that transparency will just keep improving. Technology will just go around us, as you said, AI, machine learning, cloud, whatever you know. And you brought up who understands Kubernetes. Who does understand that? There are very, anyway. But the fact of the matter is that it's about what fits your culture, and that's where I think the key to success is around that soft, that magic, that lean space and that growth, and people working together and people acting like a team and using the we language and really growing together rather than a bunch of silos and individuals. So the cultural thing, that to me is where I hope to see the future, the leanness and agile, and keep going in that direction, but find that word.
The answer's on a postcard for the word then. Here's a very different question from Israel, and it's about a career in DevOps, but it's a little bit coming in from stage left. He says he's from Spain and he's been living in England for 1.5 years. He's a forestry engineer, but he's always been interested by web design and programming, and he's spent the last year studying it thoroughly. And he's finding the main problem is actually finding the entry into a job like a programmer or a web designer. And the only jobs he can find require experience. It's the old chicken and egg. He asks for your advice. Yeah.
There are quite a few companies in the area who do academies. So I know BCS do.
We do.
Conveyor do. I know. I've just seen that actually Emma used to work at TransUnion. I know TransUnion do. You joined about 5 months after I left.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So yeah, I know they did when I was there. I helped set up the sort of academy. So I would look for one of those academy programs as well. And I wouldn't, even if they brand themselves sometimes as graduate programs, I'd still look and get interested and ask, because sometimes that's not, they don't mean graduate. You don't have to have a degree. I mean, as a manager for, oh God, how many years now? Some years. I've almost never thought, not going to look at this CV. He hasn't got a degree. So I would, academies are the way forward, and I think there's quite a lot of them in the local area for places to get involved.
Emily, do you have anything to add to that?
Apprenticeships. I, interestingly enough, had a conversation with someone today about the government levy and apprenticeships. I know that often companies have that available. And if you can explore that, because there's a lot of things going on in that space, and academies, again, same thing. There are routes in, you just have to be patient and really, really search for them, and connect with your network. You know, you in the strangest place, you will find people that will be able to help you.
Yeah.
Now, you've both talked about DevOps being a culture, and that it's something that to do with a way of working rather than a particular technical skill set. Not all companies accept it or believe in it. If you found yourself discovering DevOps in the way that each of you has differently described, but the company you're working for didn't, at least not at the same time, what would your advice be? Move company? Just do it to demonstrate it? How would you cope with it? Ian?
Dope. Interesting. I think it very much depends on the company. There are absolutely, so a DevOps transformation is something that only works if it's grassroots up and leadership down. Okay, one without the other is always going to fail. If it's just grassroots, it'll get trampled on. If it's just top down, then people won't change. They'll, telling us what to do, they don't know. So it has to be both. But consequently, it has to start somewhere. So if you've discovered it and then again, you don't have to brand it with big DevOps stamp. You go, right, what are the things we need to do? How can we make what we're doing better? So if me as a developer goes, right, I want this DevOps thing, okay, well, I could go and chat to the guy in operations who's running the software I'm writing, for example, and start to try and understand that and get some feedback from it and how I could make it better. Is the deployment currently manual? I mean, lots of companies still have, manual deployments where they're copying files across and running things, which is human error. And it's like, well, actually, I'm a developer. I'm literally paid to automate things. Maybe I should automate that as well. So just the little things like that, really. But mostly, yeah, go and sit and talk to the other areas that are going to be impacted. So get dev and ops talking together and bring that closer, and see if it starts to be. If it does get trodden on and squashed, then yeah, probably move company. But I think most companies, if they see things improving, like there's less bugs or they're able to restore service quicker, will either just go, oh, cool, that's nice, and leave you alone, or go, why is that getting better? And then you really have a great conversation to have about, oh, and I've got all these other ideas too.
Emily.
Replay the question again. I want to just make sure I'm getting it right.
It's interesting that with two different perspectives, because Ian has stayed at a rapidly changing company for a long time, whereas you've had quite a few moves and done different things. But if you find yourself discovering DevOps and having that light bulb moment and realizing that it's the way forward, but you're working at a company that doesn't, how would you behave? Would you stick at it and try to influence and demonstrate and just do it and show them, or would you move?
So here's interestingly enough, I'm going to tie this back to what I said earlier, that reflect and be mindful. If I look back, and I did move around a lot, and not all of those moves were because I got bored. It was also because there were some of them where I got frustrated. And they were because people were not getting that we could be better and do better things. And I'm not going to say which ones those were, but I think it's about being tenacious, not giving up. If you're in at the grassroots and you find this magic and you want to share it, share. Because a problem shared is a problem halved. I hate to use that cliche, but then, if you start something that's good and people get excited, it goes like wildfire. But absolutely, what Ian said before, if the people at the top don't understand it and are slightly ignorant to it, and the people at the bottom are really super keen, and there's going to be a point where it's not going to work. But if they're up here and they're super enthusiastic and trust you and really buy into what you're delivering, and you're bringing up the people that way, it'll work. It'll have its bumpy moments, but it'll work. So tenacity. Would I do what I did myself again? I don't think so. I probably would have stuck with it in some places, but I've done it. So I look forward. I look back and try and take the positives out of it.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. So essentially the advice in a condensed form is use your initiative, put yourself in the right place at the right time, and believe in what you're doing. Can you add any other pithy comments to round off your advice for the people who are listening?
Only thing I'm going to say is keep being kind to people, because this time right now, it's about being kind.
Ian, I'm sure you concur with that.
Yeah, I have nothing further to add than that. That's quite right too.
Thank you very much. That has been fabulous, very insightful. We've got some great comments saying those very things. And thank you for spending the time sharing your career and experience and advice with us all. There'll be a quick one-question survey as soon as you close this session, and it would be very helpful if you would fill that in for us to help us make things better. And in an hour, you will receive an email asking for more considered feedback, not just a yes or no type of answer. And if you can take a moment to give us the benefit of your thoughts about the session, that would be incredibly helpful. We think these are good, of course, but we want to make them better, and you can help us. Thank you once again to our speakers, and thank you all for being here. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable. Thank you very much, and good night.